What's up guys, and welcome to Vancouver, Canada. This is my first time here. Some of my subscribers were kind enough to let me review their cars on this beautiful winding road. I've spent the last 48 hours or so binging on some of the best food, especially Chinese food, that I've ever had. But now it's time to get serious. It's time to drive a couple of my favorite Porsche models of all time. We're currently sitting in a 718 Cayman GTS 4.0 with a 6-speed manual, and we'll be comparing this against the 718 Cayman GT4, also with a 6-speed manual. I've done this GTS versus GT4 comparison before for the 981 generation, but today I want to take a look at the latest 718 or 982 generation. Is the GT4 truly worth the extra $30,000 to $40,000? If we're talking Canadian dollars, it might be more like $40,000 to $50,000. So a few specs about the GTS 4.0. This is powered by a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat-six engine and makes 394 horsepower, 309 pound-feet of torque. We have strut front and rear suspension, and this GTS model comes standard with Porsche Sports Exhaust, Porsche Active Suspension Management or PASM, and Porsche Torque Vectoring. This has 350mm front rotors, 330 rear. Both are undersized compared to the GT4's rotors, which we'll get to a little bit later. Market value of this car in US dollars is somewhere around $90,000 to $100,000. GT4 is closer to $120,000 to maybe $140,000 depending on condition. Now the owner Felix has done a few mods to this car, including the GT4 short shifter, a flat-six over-axle pipe, JCR non-silenced race pipe, Cargraphic valve controller, DSC sport controller for the PASM dampers, and a couple of aesthetic mods including a TWL carbon ducklid spoiler. For the drivetrain, he's got a Ninemeister lightweight flywheel and upgraded clutch, and then we're on 20-inch wheels with Michelin PS4S in OEM GT4 sizing. The GT4 that we're about to drive is basically stock. So let's say you buy a GTS 4.0 and then you spend about $20,000 to $30,000 in mods. Although I'm guessing the mods on this car, not quite that much, but the question remains, are you better off buying a GTS 4.0 and putting a few mods on it to suit your liking, or is a pretty much stock GT4 still the better road car? Specifically road car, not track car. Now this road, admittedly, is not the most technical road. It's mostly just nice open straights with a couple of sweepers, but it's a pretty busy day out here, so we're gonna take it fairly easy. And that's okay, because the question again that I want to answer is, how do these two compare as road cars? We've got the rev matching turned on. Such a great feature. Of course, you can always disable it, but when you're just trying to cruise around or you're in traffic and you want a little bit of that involvement removed just so you can get around town more easily, auto rev match works great. But right away, this exhaust sounds so good. Porsche Flat 6 inherently is already a great sounding engine, but when you put the right mods on it, the right exhaust, and give it a proper electronically controlled valve so that you can always shut this thing up when you want to, it just sounds amazing. I'm actually going to close the valve here, and it does quiet down a bit, but it's still a pretty loud car on the inside. That's because the Flat 6 is mounted right behind your head. The engine is inside the cabin for the Porsche Cayman. Unlike some other cars like the Emira or even my NSX, where there's glass separating the cabin from the engine. Electric power steering, it's so precise, the steering rack. But it's not the most feelsome steering rack in the world. It's not even close to the amount of steering feel that you get from an old Porsche hydraulic rack, say from a 987 Cayman. But the other aspects of the 718 generation, especially a GTS 4.0, things like the refinement, obviously this interior is an order of magnitude better than that of the 987, and even significantly better than the 981 generation. But also the performance and handling of this generation is even better than the 987. I recently drove a base 987 on stock suspension and compared that to a 718 Cayman T, also on stock suspension, and the difference is staggering. Porsche has come such a long way in the past 10, 15 years in terms of chassis tuning for some of their more pedestrian models, if you will, the non-GT cars. This road is not perfect. It's on the smoother side, but there's definitely quite a few bumps here and there. But this suspension setup just soaks it up so well. The 6-speed manual shifter is super easy to use. It has nice light throws, but that doesn't mean it's not precise. And the GT4 short shifter definitely brings it up a notch. I remember driving a stock GTS 4.0 with a stock shifter a while back. And while good, it doesn't have that mechanical feeling of the GT4 shifter. So this upgrade is definitely well worth it. What a sound. And that's with the valve closed. Let me flip a UE here and I'll show you how insane this thing is with the valve open. And this 4-liter engine makes so much more torque than the smaller displacement engines of the prior generations, the 981 and the 987. Valve is now open. If that's not one of the best sounding cars that you can get for right around 100,000 US dollars, I don't know what is. The GTS 4.0 is worth every penny over the 4-cylinder turbocharged 718 models, in my opinion. A Porsche Cayman or 911 deserves a flat 6 engine. It's a unique sound and it's part of the quintessential Porsche experience. Even if this one had 50 fewer horsepower, I'd take it over the 4-cylinder every day. Look at this. I mean, that's really the only downside to this car is with the 6-speed manual, the second gear is so long. Even on a road like this, we're not able to open it up all that much. Second gear goes to over 80 miles per hour. And yes, there is a fix for it. You can get the Sharkworks short gear set. There's a couple of other companies, I'm told, that do something similar, but they all cost so much. You get what you pay for. No car is perfect out of the box. And if you want your Cayman to be about as perfect as possible, you get it with the 6-speed manual and the short gears. Now, when we're just cruising around, the GTS 4.0 is actually really comfortable. It rides nice and soft. It has a good amount of sound deadening. You could argue it's a little bit of a GT sports car, whereas that GT4 is a lot more hardcore. But let's find out for ourselves. Let's jump into the GT4 and see if it really is worth the extra cash. All right, so we're now in the 2022 Porsche Cayman GT4. It's a very similar car, obviously, but this one is prepped from the factory for track work. More power, better aero, better brakes, better suspension, but does that make it a better road car? So the owner, Ken, has done just a couple of mods to this. We're on the stock GT4 suspension, but it's been lowered about 8 millimeters from the OEM ride height. And we're on TE37 Ultra M's. They're 20 inches all around, 8.5 inch wide in the front, 11 inch in the rear. And we're on Michelin Cup 2 tires. We have a custom titanium over axle pipe, BMC air filters, Cargraphic valve controller, and an RSNV wing riser. So we're powered by the same 4-liter flat 6 engine, but this one's been tuned to make 414 horsepower and the same 309 pound-feet of torque. This one revs a bit higher, all the way up to 8,000 RPM. From the factory, this car sits about 10 mil lower than the GTS. It's still strut front and rear suspension, but this one has superior geometry where you can actually adjust the toe and the camber settings. 380 millimeter rotors front and rear, so quite a bit bigger than the ones on the GTS 4.0. And market value, as I mentioned earlier, is about 120 to 140,000 US dollars. Interior does feel a little bit more special. It feels a little bit more focused. Obviously, we have the amazing Porsche carbon bucket seats, which are a lot more aggressive than the seats in the GTS 4.0. Fairly comfortable once you're in the car, but getting in and out, that's where it's a little bit of a pain. So we're gonna have the auto blip on and exhaust valve open. what? I can't believe I'm saying this, but that GTS 4.0 sounds even better. Full mod list in the video description for both of these cars, but whatever Felix did with that exhaust setup, it sounds insane. It sounds better than this GT4. Now, one thing you notice right away in the GT4 is that it's louder in here. It's stiffer. Not so much that the car becomes unbearable to drive on the street, but it's pretty significant. Even just the amount of tire noise I'm hearing. Just cruising at around 105 kilometers per hour, which is around 65 miles an hour. Yeah, this is a noisy car. Part of that could be the Michelin Cup 2 tires versus PS4S on that GTS 4.0. But the GT4 is just a noticeably more focused machine. It's not built for maximum compliance on the street. It's built to be fast on the track, but still be somewhat livable on the street. You can drive this to and from the track, but you're not really expected to daily drive this car. That statement applies even more to that GT3 RS right in front of us. What an absolutely insane looking car from behind. The crazy thing is, I'm pretty sure that car is stock. Look at the size and height and width of that rear wing. First time I've actually followed behind one on the road, and oh my goodness, does it have road presence. It looks like it doesn't even belong on the road. It looks like a true racing car, and yet it has a license plate. But back to the GT4. The GT4 is the entry-level Porsche GT car, and for good reason. They didn't make this car as hardcore as even the regular 992 GT3, much less the GT3 RS. And so if you're looking for that balance of track performance, but also on-road precision, the GT4 provides that without feeling overly compromised. And it's actually quite a bit more comfortable and livable than even the 992 GT3. I've driven both cars on the same road, and the GT3 is quite a bit more harsh. And so in some sense, the GT4 is a very well-balanced street and track car, but then you compare that to the GTS 4.0, and then it makes you question what the word balance is really referring to here. Because if you want a truly comfortable everyday sports car that still accelerates basically just like a GT4, sounds just as good as a GT4, potentially even better. I mean, the GTS 4.0 really delivers that experience. It's softer around the edges where you likely want it to be if you're choosing that over the GT4. But where most people want the emotion and the character is in the engine. When you're not attacking corners at 10/10ths, you still want to have that engaging, raw, visceral driving experience, but you want to be able to turn that on and off at will. And the way you do that in a GTS 4.0 is with a valved exhaust and your right foot. When you start attacking corners even remotely hard, the GT4 is the car that you want to be in because of that extra confidence it gives you. The firmness of the suspension combined with these excellent dampers, it's the gold standard for a reason. For a mid-engine, driver-focused sports car that's track capable, the GT4 is still one of the best driving experiences you can have for less than $200,000 US. But when you dial things back, put the suspension into the softer setting, it's still just a little bit too uncompromised. As a pure road car, if you never plan to take your GT4 to the track, what's the point? That's the question I would ask. I truly think you're better off with the GTS 4.0 in that case. Now I get it, the GT4 is a better looking car. It's more aggressive, it has the aero, it has the lower stance. The front bumper even looks quite a bit better in my opinion. The GTS 4.0 just looks like any other Cayman that's been tarted up just a little bit. But if driving dynamics are what you're after and usability on a daily basis, then I say go for the car that's been designed with that use case as its priority. It still gives you the 4-liter flat 6. It gives you almost the same horsepower. It's only 20 horsepower down, and yet the GTS 4.0 is actually around 40 to 50 pounds lighter. So the fewer horsepower actually is partially offset, but end of the day, you can't go wrong with either of these two cars. For this type of driving, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I take the GTS 4.0. It's less in your face, it's less flashy, you can fly under the radar just that little bit easier, and yet it's still a phenomenal driving machine. If I had to quantify it, I would say it's maybe 85% as raw, as precise, as driver focused. The differences are immediately apparent, and I think the GTS 4.0 as a road car is the one I'd have. Go figure, right? So a big shout out to the owners, Felix and Ken, for letting me drive these amazing 718 Caymans. Let me know how you think these two cars compare for the extra 30 to 40,000 US dollars. Is the GT4 worth it if you're not going to track the car? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.